Over 5 million have been made. This is one of the latest models. And this is one of the very first Minis. It was made in 1959. As you can see, the design has hardly changed. Very few cars have lasted as long as the Mini. So, why is it so popular?
I think because they're so well designed and so economical. They last a long time. I can't think of any other cars that you see so many of them when they're so old. And they're very easy to drive around town and easy to park and just good cars to drive, really.
The Mini is so special for me because I can maintain and service and repair them with small hand tools within my own workshop. They're a car that anybody can drive. Most people have driven one at some time, and all of the controls are simple. And so therefore you don't have to relearn the car each time you get in it to drive.
In the late 1950s, BMC, the British Motor Corporation, wanted to build a car that was different from other cars. They wanted it to be small, cheap and economical, like the bubble car. But the bubble car could only take 2 passengers. BMC wanted a family car big enough to carry 4 passengers. Nowadays, that doesn't sound like a difficult problem, but in 1957 it was. At that time, a typical small family car looked like this. It was quite long, about 3.5 meters. It had large wheels and a large space for the engine. So there wasn't much room for the passengers. And it was expensive to make, and it cost a lot to run. The Mini was designed by Alec Isigonis. This wasn't his first car. In 1948, he designed the Morris Minor, which was also very successful. He was a fast worker. He drew designs for the Mini on small pieces of paper, even on the back of envelopes. From the first idea to the first complete car took just 2 years, an incredible achievement. Isigonis' problem was this: how to design a car which was smaller than most family cars, but which had more space inside. First of all, he decided that the Mini should be 3 meters long, 1/2 meter shorter than most small cars. Next, the wheels were made much smaller, with independent suspension, and they were put right at the 4 corners of the car. Then the engine was turned sideways, and the gearbox was put underneath. More space was saved by having front-wheel drive, and there was still room for 4 passengers. In 1959, this design was revolutionary. Today, nearly every small car is based on the design of the Mini. Like the Volkswagen Beetle in Germany, the Mini was designed as a people's car. It was cheap and economical, and in the early 1960s, many ordinary families in Britain bought one. Everybody was very surprised then when the Mini became a very fashionable car. Many famous people drove them. Film stars, pop stars, politicians, royalty. Even Enzo Ferrari, the famous Italian sports car designer, owned one. How many Minis have you got?
I've got 2 Minis, but only one of them goes.
I think at the last count, 14.
Do you repair them yourself?
Well, I have tried, but no, I get somebody to do it for me usually.
What's the fastest you've ever driven a Mini?
The fastest I've been in this particular one is about 125 miles an hour.
What's the largest number of people you've ever got into a Mini?
Oh, not very many, only about 5 or 6.
There were 4 of us actually in the front seat, and I think there were 5 in the back seat, and 1 was sitting in the boot with the boot lid laying down.
By the mid-1960s, the Mini was both a popular family car and a fashion accessory for the rich. But something even more surprising was happening. The Mini was becoming a very successful high-performance car. The unique design, especially the position of the wheels with their independent suspension, and the car's low centre of gravity meant that Minis were very fast, especially when going around corners. Minis took part in all the major European rallies from 1960. There were a lot of bigger, faster cars in these races, such as the Porsche 911 and the Citroën DS, but on narrow, winding roads, nothing could beat the Mini. These three Minis won the Monte Carlo Rally in 1964, 1965, and 1967. Is there anything you don't like about the Mini?
I can honestly say no.
They're not very good when it's damp. If it rains, they're a bit tricky to start.
Is there any other car that you'd prefer to have?
Only something like a Porsche, but realistically, not really.
And would you swap your Mini for another car?
Oh no, I don't think so.
The Mini is not the most elegant car. It's not the fastest car or the most comfortable either. But it's got plenty of character. It's fun to drive, and although it's over 30 years old, it still looks good. And of course, it's easy to park.
They're here, Geoffrey. You go and put the kettle on. I'll answer the door.
Yes, dear.
Now tell me again about your parents. What does your father do?
I've told you before. He's a bank manager and my mum teaches art.
Hello.
Hello, Mum. This is Paola.
It's lovely to meet you. We've heard so much about you.
I'm very pleased to meet you, Mrs. Evans.
Please call me Janet. Come in, come in. David, take Paola's coat, dear.
Yes, Mum.
Come into the sitting room.
Dad, can I introduce you to Paola?
Hello, Paola. Pleased to meet you.
Mr. Evans. Oh, these are for you.
Very kind of you. I love these. We can have some after lunch. Did you put the kettle on, Geoffrey?
Yes, I did, dear.
Paola, would you like some tea or would you prefer coffee?
A tea would be lovely.
Tea for you, David?
Yes, please, Mum. I'll come and help you.
Oh, please, take a seat, Paola.
Thanks.
How are you enjoying your stay in England?
Oh, it's great. Cornwall is very beautiful.
Yes, it's lovely, isn't it? But it's a bit wet at this time of year. David tells me you're a photographer.
Yes, that's right. I'm here taking photographs for a magazine.
Oh, you should take photographs of one of David's articles. You'd make a good team.
She's lovely, David.
Shh. She'll hear you.
Must be very difficult for you, living in different countries.
We're not exactly going out together, Mum.
Well, you can't, can you? Not with her living in Rome and you in Bath.
I mean, she's not my girlfriend.
These things take time. Your father and I were engaged for 6 years before we got married. Don't forget the milk, dear.
And you live in Rome, don't you, Paola?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, Janet and I went there on our honeymoon. That was a long time ago.
30 years ago in May. We might go there again for our anniversary, mightn't we, Geoffrey?
If you do, you must come and see me. I can show you around.
That would be lovely.
Your English is very good, Paola.
Thank you. I go to classes in Rome. And, of course, I practice on David.
Doesn't David speak to you in Italian, then?
Not very much.
Oh, David. And you studied it for years at school?
For 2 years? Well, I would speak Italian, but Paola's English is so good. I spoke Italian when I was in Italy at Easter.
He did. He tried very hard. He had to. Most of my friends don't speak much English.
How long are you here for, Paola?
I have to go back to Italy the day after tomorrow.
Oh, what a shame.
In the heart of the English countryside, you feel that life hasn't changed for centuries. Here it is quiet and peaceful. People can escape from the cities and their crowds, pollution and noise. This is King's Sutton, a village in Northamptonshire, about 40 miles from the huge industrial city of Birmingham. Many of the houses in the centre of the village are 300 or 400 years old.
This square certainly hasn't changed much. For centuries, this was the whole village.
At the end of the square stands the church of St. Peter and St. Paul. It was built between 1220 and 1450 and is the oldest building in the village. But life here has changed a lot. Most of the changes have happened during this century. King's Sutton used to be a farming community. At the beginning of this century, about 1,000 people lived in the village, and most of them worked on farms in the area. But nowadays, machinery does the work of horses and men, and only 7% of the population work in agriculture.
In the past, the villagers rarely travelled outside the village. They could buy almost everything they needed at the local shops. Morning. This was the village bakery. The baker used to make bread for the whole village, but I don't think any bread has been made here recently.
Elsie Merry was born in the village and has lived here all her life. Her father was the village baker.
Elsie, when did your father open the bakery?
He came to the bakery in 1915. It's always been a bakery from 1802, but he came in 1915 during the First World War.
Was it hard work baking bread?
Very hard work, yes, up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock on Saturday morning, always.
So when did the bakery close?
2 years ago, 2 years last Easter.
Many of the other shops have closed too. That's strange because there are now 2,000 people living here. The population has doubled since 1945. And the village is much bigger. New housing estates have been built for the newcomers. But not many of the people who live in these houses work in the village.
You see, King's Sutton isn't a self-sufficient community anymore. The villagers work in nearby towns, and they do most of their shopping there too, in large supermarkets. How do they get there? Not by bicycle, but by car and train.
Why do you like living in King's Sutton?
It's friendly, it has good cities, good communication, it's just a good community.
I like the people mostly, and quite a bit goes on, so it's quite interesting, and it's reasonably peaceful.
I like the village life. I've always lived here. I like the community life. The only thing I don't like is that everybody knows your business.
Well, I like it living here better than doing it anywhere